Good morning students. Today we are going to discuss about the topic Indian society through the ages. As students of sociology, you will require some knowledge of the historical and philosophical factors that influenced society in India through many ages. Every society is a product of many historical and cultural factors which influence society minutely to the present day. As young people who live in the 21st century and have access to many technological and scientific developments which were not available to people who lived in India even 100 years ago. You may feel that we are the only people shaping our lives and the future of our society by our actions today. But the reality is that the beliefs, customs and practices of our ancestors and many historical facts and events that influenced our Indian society many centuries ago also have an influence on us and our society today. This is why we are going to be looking at the topic Indian society through the ages today. We will first begin by describing the history of India in Jawaharlal Nehru words as a bundle of contradictions held together by strong but invisible threads. We will try to analyze those contradictions and identify those invisible threads in this session. Early India. Students, can you guess from when or long ago our Indian subcontinent existed? The history of this astonishing subcontinent dates back to almost 75,000 years ago with the evidence of human activity of Homo sapiens. The Indus Valley civilization, which thrived in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent from 3300 to 1300 BCE, was the first major civilization in India. But before we go into civilized time, let us look at the happenings in prehistoric times in India. The Stone Age. The Stone Age began 5 lakh to 2 lakh years ago, and recent finds in Tamil Nadu indicate the presence of the first humans in the area. Tools crafted by proto-humans that have been dated back to 2 million years have been discovered in the northwestern part of India. The Bronze Age. The Bronze Age in the Indian subcontinent dates back to around 3300 BCE with the early Indus Valley civilization. Historically, part of ancient India, it is one of the world's earliest urban civilization. Inhabitants of this era developed new techniques in metallurgy and handicraft and produced copper, bronze, lead and tin. Now we move on the early historic period when civilization and society can be said to have started appearing in the Indian subcontinent. The Indus Valley civilization, 2500 to 1500 BC. The rise of civilization in the Indus Valley was around 2500 BC. Let us see what caused the beginning of this civilization. Neolithic farmers lived in food-producing villages situated on the hilly flanks of a large river valley. Under pressure from increased population and the need for more lands and water, they moved to the more abundant and fertile soil of the river valley. Here, their successful adaptation to a new environment led to the more complex way of life called a civilization. In India's case, 4 or 5 of the farming villages had grown into large cities with as many as 40,000 inhabitants by 2300 BC. Excavations of 2 of these cities, Mohenjo-daro in Sindh and Harappa in the Punjab have provided most of our knowledge of this civilization. Although Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were 400 miles apart, the Indus River made possible the maintenance of a uniform administration and economy over the large area. The cities were carefully planned with straight paved streets intersecting at right angles and an elaborate drainage system with underground channels. A standard system of waits was used throughout the area. The spacious two-storied houses of the well-to-do contained bathrooms and were constructed with the same type of baked bricks used for roads. A uniform script employing some 400 pictographic signs was used in these cities. Do you have any idea of the economy of the Indus Valley civilization? The economy of the Indus civilization, like that of Babylonia and Egypt, was based on irrigation farming. Wheat and barley were the crops, and the state collected these grains as taxes and stored them in huge granaries. The importance of agriculture explains the presence of numerous mother goddesses. For the first known time in world history, chickens were domesticated as a food source, and cotton was grown and used in making textiles. The spinning and weaving of cotton continues in modern times to be India's chief industry. Copper and bronze were used for tools and weapons, but the rarity of weapons indicates that warfare was uncommon. Trade was sufficiently well organized to obtain needed raw materials, copper, tin, silver, gold, and timber from the mountain regions to the west. There is also evidence of active trade contacts with Mesopotamia, some 1500 miles to the west, as early as 2300 BC. For centuries, the people of Indus Valley pursued a relatively unchanging way of life. However, decline had set in about 1700 BC, when a series of great floods caused by earthquakes altered the course of Indus. The Aryan invasion and early Vedic Age, 1500 to 1000 BC. Do you know what historical age succeeded the Indus Valley civilization in India? The invaders who brought an end to what was left of Indus civilization called themselves Aryans, meaning nobles. They spoke Sanskrit, an Indo-European language. The Aryans counted their wealth in cattle, and their chief interests were war and cattle rustling. Their horse-drawn chariots, which were new to India, made them invincible. The native population, later called Dravidians, was either conquered by the Aryans as they expanded eastward into Ganges Plan or driven south into the Deccan. The Aryans refer to these darker-skinned but more civilized conquered people as dasas, slaves. We know more about the Aryans than we know about their Indus civilization predecessors. Our knowledge comes largely from the four Vedas, collection of hymns to the gods and ritual texts composed and handed down orally between 1500 and 500 BC by the Aryan priests, the Brahmins. Hence, this 1000-year period is commonly called the Vedic Age. The earliest and most important of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, Royal Veda, the earliest surviving Indo-European work of literature, gives an insight into the institution and ideas of the early Vedic age, which ended about 1000 BC. The earliest hymns in the Rig Veda mention only two social classes, the Kshatriyas, nobility, and the Vaishyas, commoners. But by the end of the early Vedic age, two additional classes were recognized. The Brahmins or priests had begun to assume the highest social rank, and the Shudras, the non-Aryan, conquered population of workers and serves at the bottom of the social scale. From these four classes, the famous caste system of India was to develop during the later Vedic age. The early Aryans had an unsophisticated pre-moral religion. It involved making sacrifices, the force of nature in return for such material gains as victory in war, long life, and many offspring. The later Vedic age, 1000 to 500 BC. Which age succeeded the early Vedic age, and how do we know about things that happened so many thousands of years ago? Most of our knowledge about the 500 years that comprise the later Vedic age is gleaned from two great epics, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, and from the religious compositions of the Brahmin priests. The later comprise three major groups. First, the three-letter Vedas, containing many hymns along with spells and incantations designed to avoid harm or secure blessings to the worshipper. Second, the Brahmanas, which describe and explain the priestly ritual of sacrifice and reflect the dominant position achieved by the Brahmin class in society. And third, the more philosophical speculations collectively known as the Upanishads. The core of the Mahabharata is a great war between rivals for the throne of an Aryan system situated in the upper Ganges plain in the region of the modern Delhi. Many passages dwell on the warriors' joy of battle as they fight for glory and booty. All rulers of Aryan India participate in a battle which rages for 18 days near the beginning of later Vedic age. The epic contains many passages on religious duties, morals, and statecraft. One of the most famous editions in the Bhagavad Gita, a philosophical dialogue which stresses the performance of duty or dharma without passion or fear. The other great epic, the Ramayana, recounts the wanderings of the banished Prince Rama and his faithful wife Sita's long vigil before they are reunited and Rama gains his rightful throne. In the course of time, priestly editors transformed this simple adventure story into a book of devotion. Rama became the ideal man and incarnation of the great god Vishnu, while Sita emerged as the perfect woman, devoted and submissive to her husband. Her words were memorized by almost every Hindu bride. Car and state and gilded palace, vain are these to woman's life. Dearer is her husband's shadow to the loved and loving wife. The two epics, together with the last three Vedas and the Brahmanas, reflect the many changes that occurred in Indian life during the later Vedic age. By the beginning of this age, the Aryans had mastered iron metallurgy. The Aryans had also moved eastward from the Punjab, conquering the native population and forming larger and frequently varying states in the upper Ganges Valley. The Rajas now lived in palaces and collected taxes in the form of goods from the villages in order to sustain their courts and armies. A few small cities arose, some as administrative centers connected with the palace and some as commercial centers. Village, caste and family. The Vedic ages of India existed thousands of years ago. But when we look at society in India today also, we see the effects of this period. The philosophical basis for Indian society was laid down in Vedic ages only. In the later Vedic age, the three pillars of traditional Indian society, the autonomous village, caste and the joint family, were established. India has always been primarily agricultural and its countryside is still a patchwork of thousands of villages. The ancient village was made up of joint families governed by a headman and a council of elders. Villages enjoyed considerable autonomy. Raja's government hardly interfered at all as long as it received its quota of taxes. The four classes or castes, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Brahmanas and Shudras, have remained constant throughout India's history. But during the later Vedic age, the Brahmins assumed the highest social rank. The four castes also began to subdivide into numerous subcastes, each with a special social, occupational, or religious character. For example, new occupational groups as merchants and artisans become subcastes of the Vaishyas. Furthermore, another main social division was formed, consisting of those whose occupations were the most menial and degrading. Scavengers, sweepers, tanners, and carriers of humans and animal wastes. These outcasts were called untouchables because their touch was considered defilling to the upper castes. Although the inequalities of the caste system clearly contributed to the wealth and influence of the upper castes, the lower caste groups came to accept the system. One reason for this was the manner in which a caste performed the functions of a guild in maintaining a monopoly for the caste in its occupation and in securing other favorable conditions for its members. By maintaining discipline in accordance with caste rules, the caste leaders in each village also gave Indian society a stability that partially compensated for the lack of political stability through much of Indian history. The third pillar of Indian society was the joint family, in which the wives of all the sons of the patriarch of the family came to live and raise the children. When the patriarch died, his authority was transferred to his eldest son, but his property was divided equally among all his sons. Women could not inherit property, nor could they participate in sacrifices to the gods. Their presence at the sacrifice was considered a source of pollution. The emphasis placed on the interest and security of the group rather than on the individual is a common denominator of the three pillars of Indian society: the autonomous village, the caste system, and the joint family. Thus, Indian society has always been concerned with stability rather than with progress in the Western sense. The Indians have had a more passive outlook than their Western counterparts. The middle way of Gautam Buddha. Indian society is well known all over the world for the caste system, which was one of the most unjust social systems ever invented by mankind. The injustice and oppression that came with the caste system was addressed by the appearance of Buddhism. Gautama, 563 to 483 BC, was the son of a leading noble in a small oligarchic republic located at the foot of Himalayas. In his 29th year, according to tradition, Gautam was deeply shocked by the misery, disease and sorrow that he saw as he walked through the streets of his native city. He renounced his wealth and position and, forsaking his wife and children, determined to seek a meaningful answer to the question of human suffering. One day, while sitting beneath a sacred fig tree, meditating on the problem of human suffering, Gautama received enlightenment. The meaning, the cause and the conquest of suffering became clear to him. From his insight, he constructed a religious philosophy that has affected the lives of millions of people for 2500 years. The Buddha sought to strip the Upanishadic teachings of the corruptions that had enveloped them. He also did not believe that only members of the Brahmin castes could attain release from the wheel of birth and rebirth, insisting that release was possible for everyone regardless of caste. Indeed, what the Buddha taught was more a philosophy than a religion. Thus, Buddhism became a movement separate from Hinduism. Buddhism began to fade as an independent religion in India. Buddhism's impact on Hinduism was important as it purified the older religion. More emphasis was placed on ethical conduct as a means of salvation and less on sacrifices, ritual prayers and magic spells. Another order of monks and lay followers who reject the authority of the Brahmin priests was Jainism. Its founder was Mahavira, a younger contemporary of the Buddha. Jainism has much in common with Buddhism, but it had never attained Buddhism's popularity. It is probably more through the influence of Jainism than of Buddhism. Non-violence became a significant aspect of Hinduism. Maurya Empire. The Maurya Empire, ruled by the Mauryan dynasty from 322 to 185 BCE, was a geographically extensive and mighty political and military empire in ancient India, established in the subcontinent by Chandragupta Maurya in Magadha, present-day Bihar, and it further thrived under Ashoka the Great. The Mughal Empire. In 1526, Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan from present-day Uzbekistan, swept across the Khyber Pass and established the Mughal Empire, which covered modern-day Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. The Mughal dynasty ruled most of the Indian subcontinent till 1600, after which it went into decline after 1707 and was finally defeated during India's first war of independence in 1857. Colonial Era. From the 16th century, European powers such as Portugal, Netherlands, France, and the United Kingdom established trading posts in India. Later, they took advantage of internal conflicts and established colonies in country. The British rule. The British rule in India began with the coming of the British East India Company in 1600 and continued till Indian independence from British rule in 1947. The Indian independence movement and Mahatma Gandhi. In the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi led millions of people in a national campaign of non-violent civil disobedience to contain independence from the British. Independence and partition religious tension between Hindus and Muslims had been brewing over the years, especially in provinces like Punjab and West Bengal. The Muslims were a minority and they did not feel secure in the prospect of an exclusively Hindu government and hence made them wary of independence. All through this, Mahatma Gandhi called for unity among the two religions group. The British, whose economy had been weakened after World War II, decided to leave India and participated in the formation of an interim government. The British Indian territories gained independence in 1947 after being partitioned into India and Pakistan. India post-independence. In the 66 years since India independence, India has stayed a stable democracy, one of the biggest democracies in the world. India is a home to many minorities, many tribal communities and has people of all religions. India follows the socialist pattern of development and tries to achieve equality among all its citizens since independence. Conclusion. You may have noticed that when looking at the influence of different ages on Indian society, we still study the influence of the Vedic ages because the foundation of Indian society were laid down in those times. The successive Indian empire, Mughal empires and colonial empires were able to change very little of the influence of the Vedic age on Indian society. Can you think of the important influence of the Vedic age on society in India today? Two important results of the caste system set India apart from countries. Because people readily accepted their caste as a religious duty, there was a measure of toleration among the group. Also, because the lower castes were regulated to agricultural work, there was practically no slavery in classical India. Like other agricultural societies, India's society was male-dominated or patriarchal. All public authority was made of up men. There were no women, priests, warrior or tribal leaders. These gender distinctions were outlined in a book of religious mythology called The Laws of Manu. This book called on men to treat women with respect, but insisted that women be subject to their fathers and husbands. The lack of centralized rule in India through the ages came with price. The various regions of India had their own distinctions and were never integrated into the whole as they were under Ashoka. In fact, the Gupta Empire would break along these regional divisions. After the fall of the Gupta dynasty, the Indian subcontinent would remain fragmented into regions for over 1500 years. Thus, the pattern of rule in classical India alternated between large but decentralized empires and networks of disjoint regional kingdoms. We can see many problems between different regions and states even today in India due to the long history of fragmentation, although we have had centralized rule in India since independence.